Welcome to Rob and Tony's Cinematic Adventure. I'm Rob Wilson.
And I'm Tony the Quanto.
So today we're doing The Terminator, the first of the Terminator movies, with Arnold Schwarzenegger, directed by James Cameron,
Linda Hamilton,
and Michael Biehn. And
Lance Henriksen also.
Yes, Lance Henriksen also is in it. He was in a lot in the 80s.
He's in a lot, which I had no idea.
Yeah.
Because my first exposure to him was Millennium, kind of quasi spin-off of
X-Files, yeah. But yeah, so The Terminator, fantastic movie. So, Tony, when was your first Terminator experience? When did you first see it?
It's a good question. So,
was it back when we watched it together for the first time, or did you see it before that?
The first time.
Okay.
It's funny because my first memory of Terminator was really from Terminator 2. When that came out in theaters, which obviously I was not allowed to see. I was like 6 or 7 when it came out. Mm-hmm. I guess actually, 7?
Yeah, it came out in 91, yeah.
Yeah, so I was 7 when it came out, almost 8. But, with an older brother, we had, knowing different people that talk about wanting to see Judgment Day because it was a big blockbuster. And at that point, I knew Arnold Schwarzenegger, obviously, but Terminator movies are nothing. So, yeah, it wasn't until we first watched it, and I'd actually seen Terminator 2 first.
But yeah, that was back when I was going for the fire department, the Fairfax County Fire Department.
That's when it was.
Every Wednesday night, I'd go to the training session for the physical test, and then afterwards we'd get together and we'd usually get a twisted crust pizza from Pizza Hut and watch a movie.
Sugarland.
And and one of them we watched was Terminator. Although that was not the first time I had seen it. I saw it when I was little. I saw it back in, it was 91.
Okay.
It might have been 92 because it was right after T2 came out on video. Mm-hmm. So it might have been 92. I don't remember how big of a gap there was between the theatrical release and the home video release of T2. But one night, my dad came. I was like 7 years old.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was like 7 years old. My dad comes home, gets my brother and me, and we go into the living room, and we have a triple feature. We watch Terminator, we watch T2, and we watch Backdraft. Back to back to back. It was a great night.
It's
one of the few times that I was ever actually allowed to watch a rated R movie when I was little. And we watched 3 of them in a row. It was great. It was great. But yeah, after that, I was pretty obsessed with the Terminator.
I probably saw Backdraft around that same time. But yeah, I think my dad probably had run it. I just ended up watching it. I don't think I made that connection ever being this rated R movie. But Backdraft's not the hardest R-rated movie. No,
it's not.
It's not like, Terminator and Terminator 2, which are pretty hard R.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
And there's harder ones, but...
yeah, but yeah, so that was... Yeah, my first experience with Terminator was, I was about 7 years old or so. I remember I was laying down on the couch. Dad and my brother were in the 2 chairs in the living room watching T1, T2, and Backdraft.
In the 90s, it would have been hard to escape some of that world of the Terminator movies, just, because of Arnold. And, there's the 2 lines from each movie. I'll be back on the first one. Hasta la vista, baby, from T2. So
people are still...
some pop culture at that time.
People are still quoting those. And they will always be quoting them. Because those are probably Arnold Schwarzenegger's 2 most well-known lines. I mean, he's got some very quotable movies.
Oh, yeah.
But those 2 are probably his 2 top lines that people like to quote.
Yes. And part just because some of the other movies, just because, he has such a great accent that I think some of his lines, especially like in Kindergarten Cop, it's all more about how he says it, as opposed to being kind of like a perfect action type movie line, right? Really good one-liners, so to speak. But yeah, so I mean, it's probably 20 years after, that Terminator came out that I've actually seen it. And yeah, I don't know. It's funny because, we've talked about this before, like how it's very easy is to rent a bunch of movies. Like I remember.
We used to go to Blockbuster and rent stuff all the time.
I remember even, at times high school in the summer, Hollywood Video would have you could rent 5 movies for $5.
Yeah.
You go in all the old movies, and I never picked up Terminator for whatever reason. I picked up stuff like Goodfellas, Taxi Driver, Aliens, and stuff like that.
Yeah, all great movies. All definitely worthy of watching. But but there's something.
But I don't know for whatever reason why it took a little bit longer for me to get around to first Terminator.
And it's like all the all the streaming services and all that stuff, Netflix and Hulu and Peacock and all those, they're great. It's great having all these movies at your fingertips, but it's just that there was something about back in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, just going to the video store, looking through, looking for a movie,
through it. Like, there's things, obviously they'll scroll through and show recommendations, but but it's different. It's like, it's trying to, still being targeted based, there's all the algorithms trying to target you, as opposed to just kind of going through like, oh, that looks interesting. Going through and looking at the shelves, being like, okay, there's that movie, then there's that one over there. And, sometimes you know what you're wanting when you go in there. Sometimes you go in there just trying to see if you can find something to watch. And then you have that moment of disappointment when you're wanting a particular movie and there's nothing behind the box. Yo! Run up to the counter like, who rented this movie? And every once in a while you get lucky and somebody had just returned it and they just haven't put it on the shelf yet. That's right. Like, look at the stack. Yeah. Ow. Or like, sometimes they would like have them up on the shelves ready to scan back in and you're looking down the spines. Yep. Oh yeah. Oh, I miss video stores. Yeah. They were great. They were great. With the overpriced candy and yeah, well, it's part, like you go to the movie theaters. Exactly. Overpriced candy. Exactly. Overpriced candy, overpriced microwave popcorn. They gotta get their money somehow. Yep. When they're giving out $1 old movies, right? Yep. Running for a whole week. Yeah. But interesting thing about Terminator, it was released October 26, 1984, which 1984 was a leap year, right? It was February 29th. So it would be it would have been released 366 days after I was born. So I was almost a full year, right? Yeah. Next day was my first birthday. Yeah. Which makes sense because we were released on a Friday. I was born on a Thursday, but because it's a leap year, my first birthday would have been on a Saturday. So it was released. So yeah, it was released just a few months after I was born. Like a month and a half, 2 months after I was born. And what I think is interesting about it is it's completely a story of James Cameron's, right? Yeah. It's not his first movie. He did Piranha 2, but he completely came up with the story. Yeah, I mean, legend has it that he saw the Terminator in one of his nightmares. Correct. Yeah. Yeah, then that's how he got the idea for it. Which is interesting because, AI is very much still in the public discourse today in a very different way than it was back, 40 years ago, obviously. But, it's still kind of that fear that AI rising up, right? But it's the great vision he had for it. Yeah, it's funny, as we watched it last week, is, there's aspects of it that, say, 10 years ago when I would watch it, I'd say, like, oh, yeah, that's dated. And as we watch it this time, it's like, oh, it actually, it puts it in that place. But, no, it actually puts it in a certain time frame. So, it dates it, but not in a way that it's dated. No, yeah, it's dated to the extent that it encapsulates the era where it takes place. It's a timeless movie that is also dated in a way because it really speaks of the era of the mid-'80s. Correct. And which is important because it is a movie that involves some time travel. Now, similar to Looper, Looper's similar to it in a way, right, where you're trying to eliminate somebody. In this case, it's the AI, Skynet, is trying to eliminate the leader of the resistance, John Connor. Yeah. By eliminating his mom. Yeah, exactly. Trying to eliminate John Connor by making it so he's never been born. And, I think, as you always say, there will be spoilers. Yes. Yes. I think so. Thank you for that. So probably know the general synopsis. Yes. But we will be talking about the entire movie. So spoiler alert. If you don't want to be spoiled, pause the podcast, watch the movie, and come back and continue listening. If you don't mind spoilers, then keep listening. But yeah, that's it. That's the premise that there's been a war between the machines and humans, and there's a resistance leader within the humans. His name is John Connor, and machines want to make sure he's never born. Yes, so because they send back machine to eliminate his mom before he's born. Yep, because the machines figure that if John Connor was never born, then obviously couldn't grow up to lead the resistance, and I guess they don't think that anybody else might become leader. Yeah, in his absence, anyone else, there's someone usually fills the void, right? And it's weird because, like, even within the series, it almost even addresses that because it seems like even though, like, the heroes in the present try to engineer ways to prevent this Judgment Day happening, right?
Yeah, and not,
but it's still inevitable, right?
Yeah, and not
so there's still going to be this inevitable aspect that there's probably someone else to fill that void.
Yes. And not to really spoil much of the sequels, but some of them do delve into that. You know, how someone always fills the void. But that's all I will say about the sequels, because we're not talking about the sequels right now.
But yeah, the movie start, they give you kind of a brief overview in the feature, which, again, as I said earlier, the movie was released in 1984. So that's the present day of the movie for anyone that would have been watching it when it came out. And it's set in Los Angeles. But the feature in which we're kind of dealing with in terms of people being sent back is 2021. So you're looking 45 years.
Just a few years from
45
now.
45 years. Yeah, which is... And I just, I think it's just, the start of it's just great because it's just dark and bleak and skulls being crushed by machines. And one of the great masters who has since passed, Stan Winston, helped create a lot of the Terminators for the movie and the effects. He's worked on other movies like Alien and Jurassic Park and so many things. He's so influential in this movie. But yeah, you see it right away. It's just the effects of it are just, it's kind of fun. It's almost 40 years later, right? 38 years and it's been released. It holds up really well.
Yes, it does.
Some of the effects, some of the effects later in the movie that are more computer generated, obviously, the practical effects are just absolutely spot on.
Yeah. You can tell some of the effects are clearly stop motion, but like you're saying, the practical effects are incredible.
So they give us that setup, and then you have, I always kind of like the effect when the Terminator, human in the case of Reese, or anyone for that matters, gets sent to the past when they emerge in the present day. Always kind of like that effect, the lightning, and they just kind of appear kind of
in a glowing ball.
Get Arnold's ass.
Mm-hmm. He did his squats.
Yeah. The fun thing about that is, like, originally I thought of O.J. Simpson playing Terminator.
Yep. Now, I've heard mixed things on that. That's true, and then I've also heard that that's fabricated.
The reason I remember this is when we used to get a Regal and they would have that factoid, and the reason why he wasn't chosen is because people want to believe he was a killer.
And I've heard that for years. I've heard that. Then more recently, I heard that it wasn't actually true. But
he might have been.
So I don't know what.
There's a lot of things with movies where
it'd be great if it is true.
There's stuff that might be like in the original script, but it gets cut very quickly from it. It's never part of the working script. And same thing like with maybe ideas for people that might be good for the role, but they're never approached for the role. It's like, oh yeah, I think this person might, because at the time, like O.J. Simpson made a bunch of movies in the 80s. He was, anyway, it's kind of funny, like, in some ways he's perfect because of like how like Keanu Reeves is perfect for the Matrix. He's very robotic, and so he's able to pull it off really well, where he doesn't have to display a range of emotions. He can just be a machine, be what he needs to do.
And he only had something like 12 lines or something like that the entire movie.
Yeah. Sarah Connor. We'll get to that.
Yeah. Sarah Connor.
Anyway, so it's set up where he shows up, the T-800, and then you also have...
There was an upgrade from the T-600s, which were easy to spot because they had rubber skin. But it's all explained by Kyle Reese later when he's talking about the future.
He does a good job. He provides all the exposition. And Kyle Reese is from the future. He's a human. They don't really explain how they know the machines are going to send somebody back to kill Sarah.
No, they don't. I mean, I don't know. They never actually say it, no, but I mean, it's kind of implied when he's talking about how they were able to break into the facility.
That's right.
And get to the time machine. But so only living tissue can be sent back.
Can't just send a machine
through time. Back. So that's why they sent a T-800 Terminator back there, because they don't have rubber skin like the T-600s. They are, in the words of Arnold Schwarzenegger in T2, The cybernetic organism, living tissue surrounding a metal endoskeleton. So it's living tissue around the machine.
Yeah.
So that protects the machine inside, the creamy machine center, from getting fried by the time travel tech. And that's also why they have to be naked in order to travel through time.
Because their shirts and everything else.
Because their clothes aren't going to go.
Organic.
Although,
put, living tissue over their clothes and they just kind of rip that off.
What about when Lady Gaga wore the meat dress? Could she have traveled through time wearing that?
She could. Well, no.
Yeah, because it needs to be living.
Tissue.
Yeah, it needs to be living tissue. Yeah. Okay, fine.
But yeah, they both, Arnold and Michael Biehn both show up butt naked. I've always liked the scene. It always makes for a good scene. Arnold shows up and finds a bunch of punks, classic 80s punks.
One of them
whom
is
played by Bill Paxton.
Exactly. He doesn't just play a punk. He plays the punk leader.
Yeah. I love it. Very classic 80s hairstyle.
Yeah.
Right?
And the one of the other punks is Brian Thompson, the bigger one, who plays Buffalo Bob in Joe Dirt.
I always think this scene's kind of funny because they're laughing at him because obviously he's naked. He's pretty foreboding.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, he's walking directly to them, not flinching, even though he's naked. He's built.
Mm-hmm.
It's Arnold at his peak.
Yeah.
Right? And they just decide to mess with him. So he murders them.
Yeah. I don't get why they try to... I mean, first off, it's a naked dude walking at you, so you know he's crazy. It's not only that, it's a gigantic naked dude.
Like at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. So he kills the punks and takes their clothes. Meanwhile, Kyle Reese, who appears in an alley,
He
gets visited by a cop.
Well, he sees like the homeless dude first, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then he gets visited by a cop.
Sees the homeless dude, takes the homeless guy's pants, and then the cop finds him, and you get the classic, "What day is it?" And then he gives him the date. "What year?"
I never got though, because like he shows up and he like kind of scares the homeless guy. He's got to see the homeless guy there in the alley sleeping. He shows up, and then like this cop car shows up, shining a light down there. Like, it's him. Like, what do you mean it's him? How do you...
Yeah. Were they looking for this particular homeless guy? Or were they looking for Kyle Reese?
Were they alerted that some dude was going to show up?
Yeah.
All lightning naked?
Yeah. That's a good question.
I mean, like you say, it kind of goes into kind of a classic foot chase thing. And then, he sees
chasing
the cop
through a department store.
And it's like, what year is it? And then they breaks into like that department store and then the chase
steals a trench coat, sneaks into the cop car, takes a shotgun out of there.
Which is, all a good setup and it's done well. And I think, James Cameron always does a good job of this setting things up cinematically and getting the audience built into the movie. And, he's given the exposition about what's happening. And he's introduced us to these two characters that he's kind of talked about. So they've set that aspect of it. You understand, like, okay, they got these clothes now. Reese has the weapon. Arnold doesn't have a weapon yet.
No.
Maybe he has, he's got, like, the little switchblade knife.
Yeah, that he got from one of the punks.
They tried to stab him. And obviously he is able to punch through their stomachs because, he has...
Classic killer robot way of killing. Yeah.
So, we get to that. But, that's kind of the initial setup.
Now, we've gone this far without really mentioning Sarah Connor much. Where at this time, she is just an oblivious 20-something, works as a waitress at a diner, where little kids like putting ice cream in her pockets.
Everyone just complains to her.
Which, I want to know, did the kid's parents see him put the ice cream in her pocket?
Apparently,
because he just picks the ice cream up.
Because the other table, applauds the little kid for doing it and says he should get the tip.
Yeah, because the little kid just picks it up on a spoon and just puts it over there, just drops it in her pocket.
But the parents are cool with that. They're terrible parents.
Yeah. Maybe they were in the bathroom or something and they left the kid by himself. It was the 80s. You could do that.
I also want to know that there's a diner, and it seemed like they had a decent-sized break room for the employees.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Anyway.
I mean, what's a diner doing with a break room anyway?
Yeah. I don't even think Olive Garden has a break room.
No, most restaurants, the break room is the kitchen.
If you want to eat your employee meal, you wait until slow hours.
Yeah.
You clock
then you
out
go find a table in the corner.
At a table, away from everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't know. California.
Yeah. Maybe they got break rooms in California diners.
But yeah, no, it's a good introduction to her because like there's obviously a lot of time between the first one and the second one where she builds herself into a soldier.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at the beginning of it, don't think she's going to be like the soldier. Out the movie, Reese just continues to talk about how strong she is. And, she doesn't see that, obviously, yet. And rolled into it. The movie does a really good job of that.
Yeah. Then she goes home after work, and we meet her roommate. We see that they have an iguana.
She's got a pet iguana. I like that, pet iguana. When she's supposed to have a date that evening, her roommate has a boyfriend that's going to come over that evening. And that's kind of where she, I kind of like that aspect of it, too. It's just this very kind of routine Friday evening for some 20-something. It takes the time to be able to do that. It's built in the character. That's why the movie really isn't that long. Cameron makes long movies now, but the movie with credits, like, an hour and 47 minutes.
Yeah, it's not quite 2 hours.
But he's effectively able to build in the character aspects. He doesn't, obviously he doesn't need to build in for Terminator because he's just a machine.
But he does, though. Like, he doesn't need to, but he does. Yep. he still creates the character of the Terminator, even though it is just this futuristic killing machine. That's really all that needs to be said about it. But he makes the Terminator its own character.
That's right. And it's funny, it's easy to knock Arnold's acting, but he does a good job for it, and he does imbue what he needs to for the character. So you get interspersed within that because you saw that evening where Reese arrives, right? And then the next day, Sarah Connor's going about her business. You don't see much of Reese, but we do get to see what's going on with the Terminator.
Yes. Terminator goes to a gun shop to get weapons.
I love this scene.
Yes, me too.
The gun
45
shop. 45
long slide with a laser sight.
He thinks he's having a day where he can close early.
Mm-hmm.
And he does close early.
I need a phased plasma rifle in the 40-watt range. Oh no! Just what you see at the counter. They were. I read a theory not too long ago that the Terminator asked for a phased plasma rifle on purpose, basically to judge the defensive capabilities of the 20th century. Like, he was testing the guy, asking for that gun in the 40-watt range, which is not very much power. It's not a very high wattage, just as a way to test the waters and to see what kind of weapons were, see if anybody from that era actually knew what that was.
Okay. Makes sense.
But it could have also just been he's from the future, so he was expecting future weapons.
But he's also a machine, so it's feasible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, so then, of course, as the gun shop clerk turns his back to get stuff put together for him, he loads the shotgun.
Basically, the paperwork,
Yeah, the Terminator loads the shotgun, and the clerk tries to protest, tries to tell him he can't do that, but obviously he can because he did. And then he kills the clerk and takes the guns. And then we get.
Do you know the name of the actor that played the clerk?
I was just looking at it not long ago. Dick Miller.
Yes, Dick Miller.
Yes, Dick Miller.
He passed away a few years ago.
What?
He was in a...
what else was he? I know I've seen him in other things.
There was some...
he was in the Burbs.
movie he was in called Trial of the Screaming Forehead.
He was in Gremlins.
Bunch of 80s stuff.
He was in the Burbs. He was in Small Soldiers.
He was in an episode of NYPD Blue. Don't know if it's the one with Dennis Franz's ass.
He was in Looney Tunes Back in Action.
He was in a couple Batman animated episodes.
Oh, really? He was in the TV version of Clueless.
He's even going to be in our next movie, Mask of the Phantasm, Chucky Soul.
Oh, yeah. He was in Lois and Clark.
Yeah, he actually had kind of a brief role in the 90s Flash series with John Shipp. He was in like a 6-episode stint in that. A little recurring character. Oh, yeah, he was the garbage man in the Burbs. Yeah, that makes sense. Anyway.
He was in Gremlins 2 also. He was Murray Futterman, who's the boss.
No idea who that character is. But yeah. So he was
in Inner Space. He was the cab driver in Inner Space with Dennis Quaid and Martin Short. Yeah, that was a good movie. Maybe we should do that one of these days.
Never seen it.
Oh, I loved that movie when I was a kid. It's a good movie. We should probably do it one of these days on here. But
so he blows away the clerk. And then I always kind of liked that, and then he goes find the phone book, right? Because you have to find the phone book.
Yeah.
What would they have done today? Like, how would they have figured out where all
they would have Googled the name.
Sarah Connors are?
He would have Googled it.
Yeah.
But what I don't get is they did the same thing that everybody in every movie who goes to a phone booth and looks through the phone book, what they do. He tears the page out. He finds the C's for Sarah Connor. He tears the page out. So what happens with the next person who needs to find something on that page?
Marty did the same thing Back in the Future.
Yeah, he did.
He's at this point, like, he's a robot.
Yeah.
He's got computer chips in him.
Yeah, he should be able to just scan it and
store it within his mind.
Exactly.
Which you kind of see him use with other things later in the movie. Anyway.
Bill and Ted never tear the pages out of the phone book.
No. They're polite boys.
Yes. I mean, granted, they take the phone booth with them, but...
But you see him, he finds the list of Sarah Connors. There's 3, which in some ways I'm always surprised there's not more Sarah Connors in the Los Angeles area.
Yeah.
No, Connor's not Smith.
No, it's not a super common name, but it's not uncommon.
But, it's not like some crazy, right? And then Sarah, Sarah's always kind of a popular name.
Yeah, so he just goes down the list of names, goes to each of the addresses.
He goes to the first. He shows up at the house. He crushes some poor kid's remote-controlled car.
Yep, with the station wagon that he's driving.
Which, is the first thing he saw. In later movies, they find cooler vehicles to commandeer.
Yeah. He goes up, crushes the kid's car. Well, I mean, the kid's playing in the street, so he left his toy truck in the street.
A car might run over him.
But then again, he's playing with toy cars, so where else would they be than in the street?
Yeah, no.
So
there's not enough space in the house, and if the backyard is going to be grass, maybe your driveway, but even the driveway is only so big.
Yeah, I mean, cars drive in the street, so why not play with your toy cars in the street?
Yeah, it's a typical residential neighborhood, and you can probably see enough in advance. Like, okay, I'm going to drive my car somewhere else to let the car go by. I
mean, they didn't really have too many of those slow children playing signs back then.
I mean, we had bench sheets in the front where we just stuck people between the driver and the passenger.
Yep.
And hope they go through the windshield.
Yep.
Or push in the cigarette lighter and stick their finger on it.
Yep. Cars don't even have cigarette lighters anymore.
Yeah, now it's just a
power outlet.
Anyway.
But yeah, so he goes, knocks on the door. The woman that lives there opens it, and all he says is, Sarah Connor.
Yes.
And he pushes open the door, pulls out his 45 long slide with a laser sight, standing 2 inches from her face with the dot on her forehead. Shoots her 6 times.
Boom. And then,
shoots her once in the head. She falls. He shoots her 5 more times while she's on the ground. He wanted to make sure that Sarah Connor was dead.
He could see there's a gaping hole in her head. No. Yeah. No. I'm going to shoot you in the chest.
Yeah. Just going to empty the magazine into you to make sure that you're dead. And then it turns out to be the wrong Sarah Connor.
But it's lucky because, we hear about her death. At least our Sarah hears about it.
Yeah, her
right.
Her roommate told her to turn on the TV. So she went and she turned on the TV. And
did they talk about how she was a mother of several children, 2 or 3 children. And thankfully, none of those little kids came walking in and see their mother get their head blown off.
Her son was probably too busy crying over his crushed toy truck.
I was going to say, it might have been one of the kids out in the street. But yeah, no, I just, it's just hilarious because, no, he has to empty the magazine into her. Yeah. I mean, it should be pretty obvious. She's dead.
I mean, there are those that argue about, why does he need the laser sight that close? But if you listen to the pawn shop clerk, when he's getting the gun, he tells him that if you start to pull the trigger, the light comes on.
Yes, he does.
The laser comes on. So that's why. It's not that he, flipped a switch to turn on the laser sight. It just, when he started pulling the trigger, that's when it came on.
In T2, he uses a feature with his computer to make sure that there's no casualties. He could have probably just looked, make sure, it's a deceased.
Yeah.
Or terminated, right?
Yeah.
No, just
probably. But T2, wasn't that the next model up of T800?
Yes.
So maybe the original model didn't have that feature.
Right. And, when we get into T2, we'll learn
because T2, he was the T10, he was the model 101, wasn't he, of the T800?
Yeah, that John was able to send him back. So it probably gave him the features to be updated, knowing that he'd be fighting against a more updated Terminator.
Something like that, it'd really just be like a firmware upgrade.
Yeah.
Just plug him in and download the update.
Yeah. Anyway, Sarah hears about this, and of course, it's kind of shocking because, Sarah Connor gets grisly murdered in broad daylight in her home, and some respectable person. It's not like it's just, anyway, obviously it seems random at the time. It's not completely random.
Yeah, but then another Sarah Connor ends up getting killed off screen.
Right, which we don't really see, and they reference it later.
They reference it at the police station.
Yes.
The cops are standing there, one of whom is Lance Henriksen.
Yep.
But they're talking about it and how they're possibly looking at a serial killer because he's just killing people named Sarah Connor.
Correct.
And
the other one is Paul Winfield.
Yeah, so
right?
they're,
and
I don't know why they suggest calling him a phone book killer, even though, yes, he is looking from a phone book, just going down the list of Sarah Connors.
He's looking from a phone booth.
But he's going through each Sarah Connor, which, if you look in the phone book, they're all listed there, which would be the only logic behind calling him the phone book killer. But if it's a specific name of person that he's going after instead of just whoever's next in the phone book,
it's not
phone book killer is not really an appropriate name for it.
Page 517, the phone book, and looking in column 3, row 8, and that's who I'm going to kill. The pattern is really more about being Sarah Connor as opposed to just using the phone book randomly. Yeah,
so why not call him the Connor killer or the Sarah Connor killer?
Mm-hmm. It's a good point. Never thought about that.
But yeah,
you have those forces, and Sarah's at home in her her apartment now with her roommate, and we get something else that don't see much anymore. An answering machine.
Yes, there's an answering machine.
Back before
their house.
People actually had phones in the house, instead of cell phones, and if you want to leave a message, it wasn't on the voicemail, it was on the answering machine.
Yep.
But we hear the guy that's supposed to take Sarah out. And again, because it's 1984, there's no cell phone. Well, very few people have.
Yes, and those that did have them paid an arm and a leg for the service.
Yeah. Leaves a message saying that, we can't make it. It's just a dick. So why isn't he dying? He should die.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so the cops decide that they're going to try to contact all the rest of the Sarah Connors in the area to warn them.
But the problem is
there may be somebody out there.
Sad because she's getting stood up on this date.
Yep. So
she decides to leave.
She decides to leave, and also because her roommate and her roommate's boyfriend are, they're going to get frisky.
Making whoopee.
Yes, they're too busy doing the deed.
By the way, it's not just in horror movies. Premarital sex leads to your death.
Yes. If it's not a masked killer at a camp or in a neighborhood or from your dreams, then it's going to be a robot from the future.
Yep.
That's going to come and kill you. So remember that, kids. Premarital sex leads to your death.
Funny enough, there is a rule that gets violated because usually you have to say, I'll be right back. You die. Well, you know what? I guess this
not always.
He does die.
Yeah. True.
No premarital sex, especially when your roommate is fearing for her life.
Yeah.
That's the consequence.
But also
it's actually perfect.
Also back to the I'll be right back thing. He doesn't say it's I'll be right back that gets you killed. He just says I'll be back.
Yeah, no, he says
doesn't say I'll be right back. So that's how he gets out of it. That's how he gets away with not.
I mean, he
dying
is right back.
Yeah.
Anyway, I always like the aspect of things because after they're done doing the dude falls asleep because it's always the dude that falls asleep. And, and she's going off to the kitchen and she's got her headphones on.
She's dancing in the kitchen.
Arnold breaks in. He's sleeping there. Obviously, wakes her boyfriend up. This is the roommate's boyfriend. Obviously, not Sarah's boyfriend. We've done with that. And then throws him through a wall.
Yeah, the boyfriend breaks a bat on his back.
Yeah, he's thinking this is his big dude. He's admirable in what he's doing, obviously. He doesn't know he's going up against a killing machine.
No, he's just wildly underestimating his opponent.
Yes. And then, he kills him, throws him through the wall, and then that's when the roommate sees all this, and she gets scared. And, remember at the same time, at this point, Terminator's most likely assuming that's Sarah Connor, right? Because that's the address.
Mm-hmm. And so he shoots her.
Kills her. Right.
And then, which only happens with movie timing, right after he kills the roommate, Sarah calls and leaves a message on the answering machine, which he hears, saying where she is, that she is at a nightclub called Tech Noir.
I love how the cop knows, Paul Winfield knows exactly where that
is. Yes.
There's the exact location of some random bar in Los Angeles. It's not like, it's not like some small college town. Like, oh yeah, I know where that is. The reason she's calling, too, is that she got out from a movie, because she's going to go to the movie instead of to spend her time. She gets out from the movie, and Michael Bain, Kyle Reese, has also looked in the phone book, finding where the different Sarah Connors live. And he is following her, right? And she picks up on this.
Yeah, so in order to get away from Kyle Reese, she ducks into Tech Noir.
And, and she's already on edge because she knows these Sarah Connors are being killed. And, this is where, this is kind of where I was thinking about there being kind of this classic aspect of the 80s. But it'd be just like if you made a movie in the 70s and you put it in a discotheque, right?
Yeah.
It would make sense because it's 1974, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they're in some jazz club in a movie that takes place in 1927.
Yeah, but this is 1984, so it's in a techno club.
Yeah. They got people in their punk-looking things, and it's a, obviously stripped down minimalist, and, gray walls. It actually fits well. Yeah, and she goes in, and Kyle Reese goes in. Never figure out, I guess at some point he gets some cash somehow because he pays in cover.
Maybe the homeless guy had a couple bucks in his pocket when he took his pants.
Right.
Maybe he had been panhandling, and that's why the cops were after the homeless guy?
Because what happens is, she's hanging out there, she's sitting by herself, and Kyle's sitting at the bar, and she sees this, she calls the cops, right? And she's been trying to call the cops, but she can't get through. And she finally gets through to the right detective to say, hey, this is what's going on.
Yeah, so he tells her to stay there, to stay visible.
Which is good advice. If it was a normal dude.
It was a normal dude that was chasing her and not a killer Terminator from the future.
But that's where the thing is, I question the cover charge because Terminator just walks straight through and the woman's like, hey,
he didn't pay. So the bouncers go and try to get him and he breaks the dude's hand and throws him down. And, yeah. But after the one bouncer gets tossed aside, they just stop trying to stop him. They don't call for bouncer backup or the cops.
Probably the cops, yeah.
But, so...
But at the same time, I don't think it's a bar, it's a bar, but I don't think they normally have a lot of problems. Maybe
it's a nightclub, so it's more than just a bar. It's a nightclub, so, they're bound to have their share of issues.
It doesn't strike me as some of these other ones, especially when there might be more illegal activity going on. Yeah.
Anyway, so Arnold raises his gun. He sees Sarah across the crowd.
Right, and she's focused on Kyle. She ends up seeing that he's there, and she gets distracted by that before she finally sees Arnold start walking towards her.
And then he raises his gun, and before he can shoot her, Kyle jumps out, pulls the sawed-off shotgun from under his trench coat, and shoots the Terminator.
Which I guess we didn't cover up the shotgun.
Yeah, the shotgun that he had gotten from the cop car, he sawed it down, and so he turned it into a sawed-off. But yeah, so
it turns into a shootout within Tech Noir.
So Kyle is able to escape with Sarah.
Unfortunately, there's a couple casualties in there, but it is what it is when they escape. And, when I always think they play this part well, where she's still not trusting of him at first. She obviously sees Arnold pointing his gun at her, and he saves her, but it's all very confusing to her still.
Yeah, which I mean is understandable because there's
really well.
So much adrenaline and
it's played well.
Sarah Connors are getting killed left and right. She doesn't know who to trust. For all she knows, it could be some game between the two of them. Who can kill the most Sarah Connors.
That's right. I like the pacing up to this point, right? Now, obviously, you have these scenes, like small action sequences that we've referenced already. It builds up the character, it builds up the background, the setting of the movie, and it builds up, I guess, just
it builds
the world
of
Terminator, right? It's world building and paces it well enough. It brings in different characters and it establishes them, makes you care about them, and now they're allowed to have this sequence that's very action-oriented.
And all that world building, all that character development, this is all still like the first 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
It's all done so quickly, but so thoroughly.
It's funny, saying this now, and because, the second Avatar just came out, and the last 25 years, James Cameron's made 3 movies, and all of them are over 3 hours long, which is fine. And each one has been massively successful.
Yeah.
So he knows how to engage an audience. But it's just such a stark contrast to this movie that's 107 minutes compared to some of these other movies. And even later, Terminator 2, which is a longer movie, and then there's the director's cut also, which is even longer. They're all great and fantastic. But I just think this movie, so far, as we're showing this, really shows off his skill knowing how to sell a story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I agree.
He knows his characters. He knows his world. He's this is how I'm presenting them. And he gets the right actors for it, too, obviously. Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton, who are they? And they do it.
James Cameron kind of is the one that made Michael Biehn a star.
Yeah.
Because you had Terminator, you had Aliens, and, after those two, he became somewhat of an action star for the rest of the 80s and then into the 90s.
He was even in The Rock.
Yeah, in The Rock. He was in Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen.
So, you don't see him as often now, which is fine. He's done what he's needed to do. He doesn't need to do a lot.
He was even in The Mandalorian.
He was. Yeah. That's right.
And also in The Walking Dead. He was in an episode of Walking Dead in this last season.
So anyway, we haven't really covered it much yet, but at this point, I think Terminator has a police car at this point, right?
Yeah. Right? He traded in his station wagon for a cop car.
And we also find out he can voice back.
Yes.
Which is important later. So they had their chase. Reese and Connor end up hiding out in a garage parking lot, which is where Sarah kind of gets the rundown, everything that's going on.
This is a big exposition dump.
Which works well
because it works well.
Cutting between them.
At this point, we kind of need an exposition dump.
Are looking for them because there's obviously just been this big shootout in a club. And now, so they look at them, and there's a scene where they kind of hit Terminator and throw him off. That's how he gets the cop car. They hit him, and they throw him off the car. And cop sees this and gets out of the cop car, and that's when Terminator steals the cop car. Pretends to be that cop.
Mimics his voice, calls him on the radio.
The Terminator looking for them, and they're just trying to hide. And he tells them about Skynet, which is created by, we haven't really said it yet, Cyberdyne Systems, which plays prominently in the second movie. But it's all about a defense network, right? Using computers as a defense network. And it becomes self-aware, a lot of times within these sci-fi movies, that humans are a threat.
And so it decides it's going to try to wipe out all humanity.
There's a global nuclear war. And so that's when Sarah gets that entire rundown of it. And we learn that the resistance really is kind of working towards victory, which is why the computers have to send back Terminator.
And so John Connor had learned of the machine's plan to send a Terminator back in time to kill Sarah Connor before he was born, before John was born. And so John sent Kyle Reese back there. Kyle just thinks that it was because he was a good soldier and he was, one of the few people that John really trusted more than anyone else, but we find out later that that's not the only reason that he sends him back. But so he sends him back to protect his mother.
I think what's important in this as well is, you look at Reese, he's probably, he's mid to late 20s. He tells Sarah, he doesn't really know anything but this desolate time of apocalypse, right?
I mean, he grew up in the middle of a war with the machines.
Yeah. So when he's originally from, when he came back, was from like 2029, probably puts his birth year, the late 90s, early 2000s. And we'll find out eventually this date that kind of triggers this nuclear war between humans and machines is kind of in flux. But it seems like the events of this movie definitely push it back to a degree. Anyway, so you get that expedition done. They're just hiding down the front seat of the car, right? Because, the cop spotlights cars, trying to see in between the cars and trying to find them.
Well, they're in the front seat of a car, but then also like sort of in a tunnel pipe, concrete pipe under the road.
And then so eventually the Terminator finds out where they are because he's listening to the police scanner in the car that he's in. And it leads between a chase between them, and they end crashing, and the rest of the cops closing on them. And that's when they arrest Reese, right? It makes sense.
They arrest Reese and they take Sarah in for protection. Yeah, and they think that Reese is the guy that's going around killing Sarah Connors, and Sarah is trying to ask the cops how much of his story could possibly be true.
Right, and they bring in a psychiatrist, Silverman, who is one of the few characters that strings across the movies, actually.
Yeah, played by Earl Bowen.
Passed away.
Yeah, Earl Bowen, who recently passed away,
what I've always liked is,
which is part of the reason why we decided to do this movie now.
Yes. What I've always liked about this, though, is that you kind of had like the two cops, Paul Winfield and Lance Henriksen. So Lance Henriksen, you can tell, doesn't like Kyle, doesn't believe him. But like Paul Winfield, you can tell he understands something else really is happening here that doesn't add up. Like, you see that cop intuition that he has, that, like, obviously the story doesn't make any sense whatsoever to him. You don't blame them for not believing the story, but you see him because in the interrogation room, you have Silverman with Reese. They're watching it, and he's just kind of chewing his gum. He's really intent on it because you can see it working in him. Like, there's some truth to what he's saying about how he's presenting it. Because obviously the guy works with him. He's a detective. He's a cop. He's dealt with a bunch of criminals, and murderers, and
he's a good cop. He's one that he looks for every detail in his investigations, and he leaves no stone unturned, and he's able to read people. He can tell, just by watching the video of the interview with Reese, he's able to tell from, his body language and his responses and stuff like that, it's not necessarily all what it seems.
I've always loved to, like, he's tireless in, like, earlier in trying to find Sarah. Once they had that pattern, like, he understands, like, we need to find the third Sarah, and it's a very kind of understated role, but he does it really, really well. And so I've always kind of loved his character within the movie because he does a really good job with it. So meanwhile, they're doing all that, and Sarah's trying to make sense of all of it because she has seen the other Terminator.
And they try to explain to her that the reason the Terminator was able to take a point blank
shots and get hit by cars,
12-gauge shotgun blast to the chest,
because of body armor.
Was because he was wearing body armor and he was high on PCP. So
it is what it is. And
so while they're in the police station, then the Terminator comes in the front door, walks by Silverman, and
for Sarah Connor.
Yes, for Sarah Connor, and they say that she's
giving a statement.
And so then the famous line, "I'll be back," and he walks out and then drives a cop car through the front door.
Crushes the desk cop.
He wasn't lying. He came back.
And proceeds to kill almost every single cop.
Yep. Just walks through the police station, just shooting everybody. And
Reese is able to get loose. He's able to kind of overpower one of the cops that's supposed to be watching him. Gets the keys, unlocks his cuffs, is able to find Sarah. They escape. And they spend their night basically in like a drainage.
I guess that's where the drainage just comes from. But that's where more exposition is coming.
There's more exposition, and then he starts talking more about kind of why he wanted to come back himself.
Yeah,
because he had this picture of Sarah, and she's the mother of this great leader, and how much she loves her. Which I guess John gets explained in the motel.
John gave him a picture of Sarah, and he memorized every line of her. Yeah. What she looks like, and fell in love with her.
She looks kind of sad. We get other glimpses of kind of how the resistance lives. we find out information about how dogs do a good job of hunting out Terminators.
Yeah, they can sniff Terminators. They can sniff them out. And so they have dogs stationed at all the entrances to their base. And so everybody that comes through has to let the dog sniff them.
Yeah, so it's, kind of runs through all that. And
then he points a rifle at a kid. You see that? The kid who's just sitting there playing in the hallway, acts like he's going to shoot at Kyle. And so Kyle raises up his gun on the kid, just jokingly, but still.
Those scenes, they do a good job of showing, like, the community, I guess.
Yeah.
You call it, that they have within there. Like, there's even how to live in. There's the girl that's just watching TV. It's just fire. They keep warm, right? Yeah, that they really sell the desolation really well.
Yeah.
Than these Flash. I guess technically Flash. For Reese are flashbacks. So.
Yeah, for Reese, they're flashbacks. For Sarah, they're flash forwards.
Flash forwards.
But, yeah.
So, yeah, no, it's just another good point where they can throw in kind of exposition dump. You kind of have a bunch of action sequences, and now dumping in this, and then just kind of he's drawing us more into the characters well again. So they wake up and realizes that he needs to kind of build defensive and that.
Yeah, so they go shopping.
Really, they go shopping.
They go shopping. They buy a bunch of household products.
They go to a motel and they go shopping, and he gets a bunch of.
Of course, when they go to the motel, the first thing that Kyle does, the motel clerk has a dog sitting outside, and he goes up and he pets the dog, lets it smell him.
Yep.
Because he's used to doing that every time he sees a dog.
Always like that little scene. It's so perfect.
Yeah. So he's so used to dogs sniff out Terminators. So he sees a dog, he's going to go let it sniff him, make sure the dog knows that he's not a Terminator, even in the past when Terminators don't exist yet.
Meanwhile, the Terminator is repairing himself.
Mm-hmm.
What's really kind of a creepy scene.
Yeah, the Terminator, one of the moments that's clearly stop motion.
It's also in a motel, but it's more like one of those seedy, city motels.
Yeah. But yeah, he uses a knife to take his eye out, his damaged eye from his fights with Reese. And so he's just got the glowing red eye and puts on a pair of sunglasses to cover it.
Oh, it's like the guy, maybe he's probably the owner of the place, right? Because he's a dude that's about to clean up a hotel room, knocks on the door. I love how it goes through the possible responses.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah, he tells them basically fuck off. But he repairs himself and he gets himself set because he needs to continue back on his mission. And we haven't really find out he also has Sarah's address book.
Yeah, he took her address book from her house when he was there earlier, killing her roommate.
I actually kind of forgot about this scene when I was watching it. Like, oh yeah, completely forgot about this. And he finds her mom, and we find out her mom was going to be the one picking her up from the police station after everything. And then we have Reese before he goes shopping tells Sarah not to speak to anybody, which she unfortunately does.
Yes, because her mom calls her, but it's not really her mom. Her mom's dead because the Terminator killed her.
Yeah, I completely
imitated her voice.
That the Terminator killed her mom.
Yes,
I completely forgot about that.
Yep. And the mom, the Terminator copied her mom's voice and called Sarah to find out where she is. But
I like this scene too because where they sign off, where Terminator's like, "Oh, I love you too," right? Because again, we talked about the voice mimic. Sarah's like, you can tell she's like, "That's weird," and that gets called back into Terminator 2, where the young John Connor is on the phone with his foster mom.
Yeah, his foster mom, and asking about.
Like, oh, she's acting weird. Like, why is she saying what she's saying, right? And he says it. And then then Terminator.
He asks, what's the dog's name? Because the dog's barking in the background and tells him the dog's name. So then he gives the foster mom a completely different name for the dog, asks how Wolfie's doing. Yeah. And she answers that he's doing just fine. And that's how the Terminator knows that it's a T-1000.
Terminator knows.
But anyway, that's the next one.
It's a good parallel within, good reference.
So Kyle gets back to the motel room.
And, he's got his shirt off.
And
he's again talking about the great John Connor and Sarah Connor. One thing,
weren't they making bombs first? When he gets back, she asks what's for dinner, and he says plastique. And she says, sounds tasty. So they're making pipe bombs
first.
So he gives Sarah her first lesson on
because he was very specific
making pipe bombs.
That he needed a room with a kitchen when they were checking in at the motel.
Yeah,
they do that, and again, they're kind of talking about the past, and she wants to know what the women are like in the past, the future.
Yeah. And he doesn't know much about women in the future because he's only known war.
Yeah.
So we find out that
actually is a really good response.
Yeah. So we find out that Kyle Reese is a virgin.
Yes.
And
he tells her that he came back for her.
Yes, because he's in love with her. And then
they reach emotional catharsis.
Exactly. I was wondering which one of us was going to say it.
It's funny to think
that's
about,
probably the greatest special feature in any movie.
Outdated.
Yeah.
But when DVDs first were released, they would have little booklets inside them.
No, it wasn't a booklet. It was one of the special features. It was actually you could flip through it on the screen.
It was on the screen. That's right.
It would talk about different scenes.
Yeah.
And one of them on the DVD, which I have never seen the version of the DVD that you have. I had not seen it ever since then. That version of it. I've looked for it. I've looked for the emotional catharsis version of the DVD. Because there's one where it's describing different scenes in the movie, and you're reading through it, and it's talking about that scene where Kyle and Sarah reach emotional catharsis, and that's all it says about it.
If you haven't caught on yet, emotional catharsis means sex.
Yes.
And, hey, they're young 20-somethings in a hotel room.
They do what 20-somethings do in a hotel room
we
when they're being hunted by a
then we see
killer robot from the future. And you know when they ultimately reach emotional catharsis because they're gripping each other's hands so tightly and then they just both let go at the same time.
Very different than the emotional catharsis from Titanic.
Yeah.
In the antique car.
With the foggy windows. And, yeah. The handprint. Oh, yeah.
I'm going back with you, Jack.
But anyway, so they reach emotional catharsis, and then the next day they go
getting ready to head out, but he hears the dog barking, right?
The Terminator found him.
And he knows that. He knows right away.
So they have to escape the Terminator again. And so they get into a car chase. The Terminator's on a motorcycle at this time, chasing him. Meanwhile, they're driving in a pickup truck, throwing pipe bombs behind them, missing the Terminator and just about every one of them, which, I mean, is understandable because they're throwing pipe bombs out of a moving pickup truck, at a motorcycle that's also moving behind them.
Which, highly maneuverable vehicle.
Yeah, so in all that, Kyle ends up getting shot, so he's wounded. And they go to...
well, she's able to knock him off after...
Yes, she's able to knock him off of the motorcycle. And so
he commandeers like a tanker truck.
Yes. He commandeers a tanker truck, throws the driver out. And so they end up outside of a factory where when they get out of their pickup truck and Kyle is able to put a pipe bomb in the back of the tanker truck.
Yeah, to the little hose tube that would go from the tank to wherever.
And ends up blowing up the tanker with the Terminator inside the cab, and ends up burning all of the Terminator's flesh off. So it's just the robot underneath.
Just the robot.
Just the metal endoskeleton, who then follows them into the factory. And so when they get in there, they start turning all the machines on so that it'll confuse his tracking, because there would be too much interference for the Terminator to be able to effectively follow them. They're fighting the Terminator in there because it catches up to him, and Reese is starting to...
He's got one last pipe bomb.
Yeah, he's got one last pipe bomb, sticks it in the middle of the Terminator's torso, blows the Terminator in half.
Yeah.
But the explosion also mortally wounds Reese.
But,
that on top of the gunshot wound from the chase and all that. So he is down for the count. Not quite dead yet, but he's mortally wounded at this point.
He goes heroically, like in any of these, any good action movie like this.
Yes, definitely. So Terminator, the top half of its body is just is crawling after Sarah. She crawls through a hydraulic press.
It's still got the chips that it's going after her.
Yeah. It doesn't have its legs anymore, but it still has its arms, and it's able to, or at least one of its arms, and it's still able to to crawl after her, drag itself. So she crawls through a hydraulic press, gets out the other side, shuts the gate on it, and as the Terminator is reaching out to try to grab her, she activates the press, and it crushes the Terminator. And you know that the Terminator is ultimately dead now because his little red eye goes out. Little red light in his eye turns off.
Again, but all this is important because we'll later find out about the arm, which is sticking out trying to grab her.
Yes, that comes back in the second movie.
And the chip in his head, find out that this is where Cyberdyne is. Which becomes important for the second movie and how Judgment Day is still inevitable. But that's not the end of the movie.
Yeah. So Sarah gets down there. She tries to wake Reese up. She tries to get him on his feet and get him to help, but it's too late, and he's dying.
I've always liked the line. It's earlier within the sequence before they get into the factory where she's like, "Oh, your feet, soldier!" Right?
Yeah, I was like that too.
It's that change within the character where you see her shifting into kind of this soldier and this.
She's not warrior. The naive 20-something anymore.
I always like that line as she's getting it before they get in.
Yeah, I always like that line too.
Yeah, and then you buy it into how you see her in T2.
Yeah. So after the factory next, it's a little bit of a time jump, not much, just maybe a week or two. But she is driving south. She's driving down south into Mexico.
And she's talking on, it's like a tape recorder.
Yep, she's making tapes for John.
Making tapes for John.
Because it's revealed that she is... Actually, I guess it's late. It's more than just a couple of weeks. It's
a little bit,
like
she's visibly
8 or 9 months later.
time.
She's visibly pregnant.
So, when they did the deed...
Yeah, when they reached emotional catharsis, that was when John was conceived.
So
we find out Kyle is John's
father.
Yep, and that is the true reason why John sent Kyle back in time to protect his mother.
Yes.
Because he knew that Kyle was his father. And if he didn't send him back in time, then John wouldn't exist.
Fuck bomb.
So then that begs the question, why didn't the machines just try to kill Kyle in the future?
They would have to be, I guess it would have to...
they would have to know that, they would have to know that he was the father, but it would make it so much simpler if they would have just killed him in the future before he was sent back in time.
There's, in terms of all the time travel physics, we don't get into that, about how, was he always the father? I don't know.
And we have, she stops at a gas station. And a little Mexican boy comes and takes her picture. Then, starts speaking Spanish. And so the gas station attendant translates for her, says that if she doesn't give him $5 for the picture, his father will beat him.
Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
And so she talks him down to $4, which is the kid going to get beat when he gets home because it's $4 and not $5?
Maybe, maybe it's a less of a beating.
Maybe it's just a spanking. Instead of a beating,
instead of I don't know what they use in Mexico for that.
Yeah,
maybe instead of like a belt with little cactus needles being driven in his butt.
Maybe it's just a switch.
Yeah,
but yeah, so gives the kid $4, and we see that it's the picture that John gave to Kyle. And before she drives off, the little boy says something else in Spanish, and she asks the gas station attendant what he said, and he says, "There's a storm coming."
That's right, yeah.
And she says, "I know," and then drives off toward the horizon where the storm clouds are. And then that fantastic music.
Yeah, which we have. It's funny. It's funny when I was rewatching this, I was thinking oh yeah, we got to talk about the music, and we haven't talked about the music until right now.
No, we can talk about it right now. We've got the movie talked about. We can talk about the music.
The score is fantastic.
It is. It really is.
And it's it actually plays the movie has kind of an opening credits thing where it's animation. Obviously, some opening credits kind of play over a scene going on within the movie. It's its own thing, and you get that the classic score.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it plays again here at the end. And it's funny. You would think you can kind of place it within the 80s, but it's not a dated piece. And it just fits really well because, there's not much to it, right? It's kind of simple, but it conveys the seriousness of it, and it's a good way to wrap the movie up. But yeah, obviously there's times where you kind of get like within tech noir where you have the classic 80s style kind of techno music, and you get it too, like within the police station. Yeah, the roommates playing 80s music on our headphones.
Yeah.
The score itself, that whenever it comes in, it's perfect.
Yeah, it fits perfectly with what's going on, and it's an incredible score.
And it's funny, like it's a very the ending there's similar in a way, and between this and T2 is the narration about the ending is different. T2 where
who did the score for?
It shouldn't be slightly hopeful. It is.
Who did the score for Terminator?
I think it was James Horner. Maybe it was.
Brad Fiedel?
Brad Fiedel.
Yeah. So Brad Fiedel. He
did both. And then he also did True Lies. So.
Oh, yeah. Another Arnold movie. Yeah. So
he did Keanu movie. He did Johnny.
Oh, he did Johnny Mnemonic? Wow.
Another kind of classic 80s horror movie, Fright Night. Maybe one of those big ones.
Yeah. So any last remarks about Terminator?
No, I love it because I love the whole Terminator series. When we do the second one shortly, we won't do it right away.
Yeah, we're not going to be doing T2 right
we can kind of
after
talk about
this
which one we like better.
Yeah, they both have their merits. They're both excellent movies. Yeah, it's hard to say which one's better.
I don't want to say a whole lot yet, but I like. It's funny again. This big action movie. At the same time, it's not like it's diving deep into a lot of like sci-fi themes. I just think it's terrific how personal he's able to make it.
Yeah.
But and again, even if it is kind of familiar themes within science fiction, they kind of put his own stamp on the story. And I don't know, in some ways I kind of miss some of these kind of action-oriented movies like this being on the smaller scale, even though it's not that small in scale, right? Yeah, no, it's just such a well-constructed movie.
It really is.
And I watch it, and it's like, it jumps from one piece to the next while still being able to give the proper background to what we know, building in characters we care about.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, like we said earlier, the first 20 minutes of the movie is character development and building the world and all of that, all crammed into like that first 20 minutes or so. It would be very easy to rush all of that, but it's not rushed. It doesn't feel rushed. It's a lot of information coming at you, but it's not overwhelming and it doesn't feel rushed. But yeah, it's a very, very well made movie.
It's just crazy when you look at it. Like, the only thing it was nominated for were the Saturn Awards, right? Which is a science fiction fantasy work group. Nothing within sound or visual effects or anything like that, right? And obviously, Terminator 2 would, because the effects within Terminator 2 were also obviously groundbreaking. Yeah, I can't believe I'm looking at that and thinking that, oh yeah, no, it didn't receive any nominations. And so I guess the other thing I look at is like, yeah, does it make any sense? Probably, especially when you look back at.
But I mean, that was also back in the day when movies like that weren't necessarily considered for Oscars or anything like that, really.
Right, and it was
they weren't.
James Cameron was not a name yet.
No. He was still in his early days.
You were going to be nominated, especially like for stuff like visual effects and sound. You had to be more well-known, had to be like a big blockbuster. Because like 84, right, the visual effects winner was Temple of Doom, and Ghostbusters was nominated.
But yeah, so there's the Terminator. Like we said, we're not gonna be jumping right into Terminator 2 just yet. We will definitely be doing that one.
Watch Terminator 2 after it if you haven't seen it.
Yeah,
because it's fantastic.
It is fantastic. Also. And we will definitely get to Terminator 2 before too long. But the next movie we're going to do, we're going to switch gears a little bit. We're going to move into the comic book realm with a movie with the best Batman ever to be Batman, Kevin Conroy, with what is arguably the best Batman movie, Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. Of course, it was the movie that spawned from Batman the Animated Series, and it is one of my favorite movies. Batman the Animated Series, of course, was my all-time favorite show, my all-time favorite TV show.
That time frame, just animated series around that time, like the golden age in some ways.
Yeah. So the next movie we're going to be doing is Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. We're going to be delving into everything that went into that movie and give our opinions on it and all of that. So join us next time. Same bat time, same bat channel. For Batman: Mask of the Phantasm.